I got great news for you, ladies and gentlemen, and that is that the body of Christ is on autopilot. It's on autopilot. I hate to tell you, but when you're flying somewhere on a jet, one pilot's reading the newspaper and the other pilot is drinking coffee and texting a friend. They're on autopilot. They don't need to pay attention until they land, and they don't even really need to pay attention then. Well, listen. We don't need to work to keep the body of Christ going. The beauty is that we don't like to work. The beauty is that if our life was on autopilot, wouldn't that be great? But look, this great organization that we're in, whose head is Christ, the unity that we're all seeking for, we're all struggling, it's made. The unity of the Spirit exists. It's merely, this is hard enough, I guess, to come to a realization of it and to trust it. You trust it. I'm talking about Ephesians 4. I am entreating you then, I, a prisoner in the Lord, to walk worthily of the calling with which you were called, with all humility and meekness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit with the tie of peace. Keep the unity of the Spirit. Doesn't say make the unity of the Spirit. We just keep it. It's like we just kind of maybe there's a little maintenance there. Like the pilots every once in a while, they'll look at their gauges, they'll look at their airspeed, make sure everything's fine. They'll have a chat with the flight attendants. Just look outside, make sure we're still in the air, make sure there are no mountains. But you don't have to make it. It exists. God has done it. His Spirit is animating it. And this is one of the greatest truths, that the body of Christ is on autopilot. So all we have to do is just not screw it up. I mean, the pilot that's drinking the coffee, just don't spill the hot coffee on your airspeed indicator. Just don't screw it up. Don't fall asleep and fall on the yoke and put the plane into a 60-degree dive. Can you just not do that? Here's how you don't screw up the body of Christ, okay? That's all we're asking you to do. Just don't screw it up. You don't have to make it, just don't screw it up. With patience, humility, meekness, okay? And one way to be not humble and not meek is to think that this is something we have to make. To think that we have to do what the Christian religion does, which is race around the world making converts and making sure that everybody's following the proper church procedure because, there's books how to do that, how to make church growth. See, we're not worried about growth. I'm going to tell you that. I think it's in this passage or it's across the page later in Ephesians 4. But we're going to get more details in here on the body of Christ probably today and tomorrow. So they're running around not only making converts, but they're trying to keep their own organization together because it's held together with kite string and Elmer's glue. And not even duct tape, but masking tape. The Christian organization is. And so they're constantly having to use techniques that they learned in seminary to keep the rickety thing together. It's the frickin' Hindenburg. Christianity is the Hindenburg. Go to YouTube, watch videos of arrival of the Hindenburg in New Jersey. Okay? That's the Christian religion. They're barely making it. But this thing that we're in is on autopilot. It's so smooth. It's so beautiful because the head is Christ, and we just keep it by being nice, by being humble, by being meek. This is easy to do when the existence of this body doesn't depend on you. If it did, then, you'd be proud. I'm keeping it together. I'm keeping the body of Christ together. No, you're not really. You're just not screwing it up. You're not falling asleep and pushing the yoke, diving us into the ocean, the Indian Ocean. You're not doing that. Because you're loving one another. I exhort you, be humble, be meek, be patient with one another, bearing with one another, because we're all screw-ups to one degree or another, so there's great opportunity for us to bear with one another. Do it in love, endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit. So that's our only endeavor, is to not screw it up. It's to be kept, not made. You see the difference there. We didn't build this. If you build it, he will come. No. Kevin Costner had to tear down his corn, put in a baseball field for Shoeless Joe Jackson to come. We didn't do anything. We don't have to tear down anything. We don't have to build anything. Jesus Christ came to us. He brings members into the body of Christ one at a time, and then he supplies that body, and I'm going to get into the details of that. He does all of this. Like, he built this aircraft. He put the wings on it. He put the engines on it. It's like he made it take off. He figured out, how to overcome heavier than air problems. And he put it into cruise control. And now it's like all the passengers were asleep. All right, just think of it that way. Jesus Christ built this structure we call the body of Christ. He did all the hard work. He died on the cross. We weren't even born yet. He called Saul, who struggled to get this message and pass it on. He was the first guy. We weren't even born yet. Paul was struggling to keep this. Paul was writing letters to his scribe, Romans, 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, the book I'm reading now, out of Ephesians. Paul did all this. We weren't even born yet. He's struggling. He's dying. He's getting beaten by the Jews, beaten by rods in Philippi. He's being shipwrecked, day and a night in a swamp, in danger everywhere. His friends hate him and all that. We're not even born yet. He made sure this is codified. He made sure this was recorded. He just wrote the letters. Well, he didn't even make sure, actually. He didn't even make sure. God made sure. So it's like God's taking us to a cruising altitude. Everything's set up. Jesus came, went to the cross, died. Paul comes. He's a jerk. He's a moron most of his life. Then he gets changed on the road to Damascus. He writes all this stuff down. He dies, gets his head chopped off. And we just show up. We just show up. And here we are. Johnny's come lately. Johnny's and Jill's come lately. We just show up. And we wake up when this craft is already in the air and it's already cruising. And it's like, how did this happen? Never mind. Just, pay attention a little bit, Don't break the window out. Don't do anything stupid. Don't fall asleep on the yoke. Endeavor to keep the unity of the Spirit with a tie of peace. One body, one Spirit, according as you were called also. You were called into this thing. It's already cruising, and like Christ is calling members into the plane. Come on in. Come on in. It's one body. We're on one plane here. Now, people say, well, what do you mean one body? Because when Paul was writing this, there was another body in existence, and it was the circumcision. Hold your horses. I'm going to get to that. One body, one Spirit, according as you were called also, with one expectation of your calling, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all. Martin, how can you say one faith, one baptism? We know that there was a different baptism. I should take this show and explain to you what the baptism is here Paul's talking about. But keep in mind, Paul is on the jet. He's on the 767 of the body of Christ. And there's only one jet. So in the body of Christ, there's only one baptism. See how that is? In the body of Christ, there's only one expectation. Now, it's true, as Paul is writing Ephesians, there is another expectation in existence. It's the circumcision expectation. But within the body of Christ, some people even want to split the body of Christ. No. Oh, there's two different bodies of Christs. There's an early one, an immature one. There's a later one. Half of Paul's letters apply to the early body of Christ. Well, it's just no. Within the body of Christ, that's what Paul's speaking of. Because again, there are some who would fracture even the body of Christ. There are some who will take our beautiful 767, cut it in half. That's not good because the oxygen masks will drop down at that point. And you'll have to go under your seat and figure out where your life raft is. You don't want to do that. We're in one plane, don't cut it in half, okay? We need this plane intact. We need both engines on it, okay? Within the body of Christ, there's one expectation, one baptism, one calling. The circumcision, they're in a helicopter, okay? We're in a jet flying over North America. They're in a helicopter flying over Israel. Completely different craft. Within their helicopter of the circumcision, they have their baptism. They have their expectation. They have their calling. We have ours in the body of Christ. One faith. Yes, we are of one faith. One God and Father of all. Now here we get more general, more broad, and God is the God of both evangels. He's the God of the 767 and the helicopter. Okay? He's the Father of all, who is over all, through all, and in all. I'm going to stop there for now. There's a whole lot more to go into. We're going to get into the nuts and bolts, or as I like to say, the joints and the assimilation, talking about the details of the body of Christ, how we articulate together. But for now, know this, that you're on autopilot. We're on autopilot. We didn't make this. And technically, we're not really maintaining it as far as keeping it a body. It is a body. The only way we could screw it up is to not be patient with one another, to not love one another, to not bear with one another. We need to hold the head. And when we hold the head, and when we look at him, maybe it takes our eyes to a good place and we're not so super analytical or super critical of each other. Okay? All right, so we keep the unity of the Spirit. The unity of the Spirit exists. It was established by Jesus Christ. It was written down and explained to us by Paul. And now all you got to do is stay awake and love each other.